My name is Ling Wei, 22 years old. They say I was born with nothing, destined to serve, to bow, to obey. And maybe they're right. I was the invisible maid who scrubbed floors, polished silver, and carried trays through the glittering halls of the Liu family mansion. A world of silk and crystal where people like me weren't meant to be seen. But that night, the night my fate shattered and remade itself, I was forced into the light. It began in the grand banquet hall, under golden chandeliers that glittered like cruel eyes. Laughter rang from every corner, and the rich paraded their jewels like battle trophies. I stood silently at the side, clutching a tray of wine glasses, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. That's what a maid should do. Never be noticed. But the whispers reached my ears anyway. Do you see her? Ling Wei, the little orphan the family took in. Pathetic, isn't she? A servant pretending to belong. She's nothing but a tool. Just wait, you'll see how the madam plans to use her tonight. My heart clenched. I lowered my gaze, pretending not to hear, though my hands trembled around the fragile glasses. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Then Madame Lu's cold, sharp voice sliced through the hall. Ling Wei, come forward. Every head turned. The music stopped. I froze where I stood, the tray suddenly too heavy in my arms. She beckoned me with a painted smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tonight, you will prove your loyalty to this family. I stepped forward slowly, my legs shaking, until I stood at the center of the glittering hall. All eyes pierced me, mocking, curious, cruel. From this moment, Madame Lu declared, her jeweled hand tightening on my arm, you will marry my son's benefactor, the great CEO, Mr. Han Shichen. The hall erupted in gasps. Han Shichen. The name thundered in my ears. Everyone knew him, cold, ruthless, untouchable. A man who ruled the city's business empire with an iron fist. He was power itself. And he was standing there, tall in a tailored black suit, expression unreadable, eyes colder than winter steel. I felt my blood drain from my face. Madam, I'm just a maid. This can't. A sharp slap cracked across my cheek before I could finish. My head spun. Madame Lu's eyes blazed with disgust. Do you think you have the right to question me? You owe this family your life. Tonight you will repay that debt. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She's nothing but a servant. Imagine marrying into such power. What a joke. A maid becoming Mrs. Han? He'll discard her in days. Shame burned my skin hotter than the slap. My throat closed, but my voice burst out, trembling. I don't want this marriage. I never asked. Silence. Madame Lu snapped. Two guards stepped forward, gripping my arms like iron. Han Shichen's voice, low and calm, finally cut through the chaos. Enough. Everyone froze. He stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over me. His eyes lingered only a moment, but it was enough to strip me bare. There was no warmth, no pity, only calculation, as if I were a piece of property being appraised. If this is the family's decision, he said flatly, I accept. My heart stopped. Accept? The crowd cheered. Madame Lu smirked in triumph. The guards tightened their grip and dragged me forward until I stood before him, trembling like a cornered animal. My lips parted to protest, but my voice broke before it reached the air. The ceremony happened in a blur. Vows spoken not with love but with chains. Rings forced onto trembling fingers. My I do choked out under the weight of humiliation, surrounded by mocking laughter. When the final words sealed the marriage, the crowd applauded, not with joy but with scorn. To them it was entertainment. A maid thrown to the wolves. I wanted to disappear. Afterward, they shoved me into a waiting car beside him. Silence filled the air like suffocation. Rain streaked down the windows, lightning splitting the sky outside. But he sat unmoving, his profile carved from stone. I dared to whisper, "Why did you agree? You don't even know me." His head turned slightly, his eyes cutting into mine with ruthless indifference. Because it doesn't matter who you are. A pawn is still useful. The words sliced deeper than any knife. I pressed my trembling hands to my lap, my vision blurring with unshed tears. I wanted to scream to demand my freedom, but fear clamped around my throat. The car pulled up to his towering mansion, black glass and steel like a fortress in the storm. They pushed me inside, and the doors shut behind us with a final echoing clang. That was the night I lost my name, my freedom, my dignity. I was no longer Ling Wei, the invisible maid. I was now Mrs. Han, wife of the coldest man alive, bound not by love, but by chains of humiliation. But as I lay awake that night in the vast, empty bed, I clenched my fists against the sheets and whispered into the darkness, "You think I am a pawn. You think I am nothing. But one day, you will regret making me your wife." The storm outside thundered in agreement, sealing my vow. The mansion was too big, too silent, and far too cold. From the moment I stepped inside Han Shichen's fortress-like home, I felt swallowed whole. Polished marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers, but their beauty mocked me. Every corner screamed luxury, yet the air was emptier than the poorest shack in my village. And him, the man I was now forced to call husband, walked ahead without looking back. Not a word, not a glance. His footsteps echoed power, mine trailed in shame. The butler, a man in his 50s with a sharp gaze, bowed politely to him before flicking his eyes toward me with disdain. "Young master, the master bedroom has been prepared." Then he turned, lips curling, and gestured toward the servants. "Show the new madam her quarters." "Quarters?" Before I could speak, two maids hurried to my side. Their eyes sparkled with mockery as they whispered to each other. One snickered. "A maid yesterday, a madam today. What a joke." They led me down a long corridor, away from his room, and opened the door to a smaller chamber. Compared to the rest of the mansion, it was plain, though still finer than anything I'd ever known. Yet the meaning was clear. I wasn't welcome by his side. I stood frozen in the doorway. "But aren't I supposed to?" The butler cut me off, his tone sharp. "The master has no need for a wife in his bed. You'll stay here. Be grateful he even allowed you into this house." My chest tightened, shame burning like fire. I bit my tongue and lowered my head. To argue would be useless. That night, lying alone on the silk sheets, I stared at the ceiling until my vision blurred. The world called me Mrs. Han, wife of the great CEO, but in truth I was still nothing more than a servant, just with a prettier cage. The days that followed were worse. At breakfast, the dining table stretched endlessly, yet only one seat mattered. His at the head. I sat timidly 2 chairs away, untouched food before me. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. The newspaper shielded his face, his coffee cup clinked softly against porcelain, and silence hung like a guillotine. I tried once timidly to speak. "Mr. Han." He lowered the paper slowly, eyes colder than steel, pinning me in place. "Eat quietly." Just 2 words. But they froze my blood, and I never dared again. Servants whispered as they passed me in the halls. "Did you see her? Trying to act like Madame Han. She's still a maid at heart. That's all she'll ever be." They snickered behind fans, mocked me when they thought I couldn't hear. Some even gave me menial chores out of spite, placing dishes on trays, fetching towels, carrying things as if I were still beneath them. And the worst part? I obeyed. Because I was too powerless to fight back. But the humiliation reached its peak one evening at a dinner party. The mansion was alive with guests, powerful men and glamorous women. I stood by his side, dressed in a gown Madame Lu had forced upon me, my hair styled by servants who muttered insults as they pinned it. Han Shichen was as cold and commanding as ever, shaking hands, exchanging business pleasantries. Beside him, I was nothing but an ornament. Then came the whispers. "Is that her? The maid who became Mrs. Han. She doesn't belong here. Look at her, so out of place. I give it a month before he discards her." Laughter rippled. My hands trembled against my dress, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to vanish. One bold socialite even approached, draping herself too closely against him. She smirked at me, her voice dripping poison. "So this is the wife you chose, Mr. Han. Unexpected. I thought you had better taste." The crowd laughed cruelly. My face burned crimson. Before I could defend myself, Han Shichen's icy voice cut through. He didn't deny their words. He didn't defend me. He simply said, "She is my wife. That's all you need to know." The way he said it, it wasn't protection. It was possession, like claiming ownership over a piece of furniture. I felt my heart sink further than ever before. Later that night, when the guests were gone, I finally dared to confront him. My voice shook, but my anger bled through. Why did you let them mock me? Why didn't you say anything?" He stopped mid-step in the corridor, his tall figure casting a shadow over me. Slowly he turned, his eyes unreadable. "Because their opinion doesn't matter. And neither do you." The words crushed me. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall before him. I bit my lip until it bled, forcing myself to stand tall even as my soul crumbled. When he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the empty corridor, I pressed my hands to my chest, whispering into the silence, "Maybe you see me as nothing now, but I swear one day I will no longer be invisible. One day, you'll look at me and regret every word you ever said." The mansion's silence answered, heavy and suffocating. Yet in that suffocating darkness, a spark flickered inside me. Weak, small, but alive. And though the world mocked me, though he treated me like a shadow, I knew this was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. I thought the whispers in the mansion were cruel. I thought the servants' smirks and their cutting words were the worst I'd face. But I was wrong. The true cruelty came the moment I stepped outside, into his world. Han Shichen's name carried weight everywhere. In business circles, in society pages, in the whispers of cafes and clubs, he was the perfect catch, the unattainable, untouchable CEO. And now I was tied to him, not as a respected wife, but as a scandal. The first magazine headline appeared only days after the dinner party. From rag to riches, CEO marries his maid? My hand shook as I held the glossy paper, staring at my own blurred image printed under flashing cameras. They'd caught me leaving the mansion once, arms full of grocery bags. My clothes were simple, my hair messy, and my eyes downcast. The article tore me apart piece by piece, mocking my background, my lack of elegance, even the way I walked. I threw it away, heart pounding, but the damage was already done. By the next week, it was everywhere. At the market, women pointed at me. In cafes, young ladies laughed behind their manicured hands. Strangers took photos without permission, posting them online with cruel captions. "Can you believe she's Mrs. Han? She looks like a beggar. He must be blind. Give her a year. He'll replace her with someone real." The words stung sharper than knives. But the worst humiliation came when I was forced to attend one of his business luncheons. It was held at an exclusive hotel ballroom, where crystal chandeliers sparkled and silver trays carried champagne. Women glided across the room in designer gowns, their perfumes blending in the air. Men in tailored suits laughed loudly, glasses clinking in casual displays of power. And then there was me. I wore a modest dress chosen by the servants, simple silk, pale and plain compared to the shimmering gowns of the other wives and socialites. My hands trembled as I clutched my purse, every step echoing in my ears. Han Shichen, of course, walked ahead, his tall figure drawing attention like a magnet. He didn't look back to see if I followed. He never did. I tried to keep close, tried to shrink into the corner of his shadow. But soon enough, the whispers started again. "She's the maid, isn't she? Did you see her shoes? Outdated. She doesn't even know how to stand properly. No poise at all." Laughter. Eyes raked over me like daggers. One woman, draped in emerald silk, stepped deliberately into my path. She looked me up and down with a sneer. "So you're Mrs. Han? Interesting. I suppose fairy tales really do exist, though usually the maid stays in the kitchen, not at the CEO's table." The crowd around her chuckled, nodding in agreement. I froze, my throat tightening. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stand tall, though my knees shook beneath the weight of their stares. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. "I may not belong in your world, but I am his wife whether you like it or not." The woman laughed, tilting her glass of champagne. Wife in name only. Do you really think a man like Han Shichen will ever love someone like you? The words cut deep. And worse, when I glanced toward him, just hoping for some defense, I found him across the room, deep in conversation with a circle of businessmen, completely indifferent to my humiliation. He didn't see. He didn't care. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them down, plastering a small, brittle smile on my face. If I showed weakness, they'd win. But they didn't stop. They circled like vultures. She must have trapped him somehow. Maybe she's useful in other ways. Oh, poor thing. She'll be discarded soon enough. My heart cracked with every word. When the luncheon finally ended, I stumbled out into the hallway, desperate for air. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, red cheeks, glassy eyes, shoulders slumped in defeat. I barely recognized myself. Was this what my life had become? A never-ending parade of shame? I thought of the girl I used to be, the maid who scrubbed floors, who dreamed quietly of a life beyond the endless chores. She had nothing, yet she had dignity. And now, married to one of the most powerful men alive, I had everything and nothing all at once. That night, back at the mansion, I tried to speak to him. My voice was small, fragile, but desperate. Do you know what they say about me? Do you even care? Han Shichen didn't look up from his documents. His pen scratched across the page, calm and cold. They say what they want. It doesn't concern me. I clenched my fists, frustration boiling over. But it concerns me. I'm the one being mocked, ridiculed. Finally, he raised his eyes, sharp as blades. Then learned to endure it. The finality in his voice crushed me more than the gossip ever could. To him, I wasn't even worth defending. That night, as I lay awake in my lonely room, the laughter of those women echoed in my ears. Their cruel faces haunted me. My chest ached, but beneath the ache, a strange fire began to burn. They saw me as weak, unworthy, nothing. Even he saw me as nothing. But maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. If I had survived a life of poverty, of endless labor and humiliation, then I could survive this too. And someday, somehow, I would make them eat their words. For the first time since my forced marriage, I closed my eyes with resolve instead of despair. Let them mock. Let him ignore me. I would rise quietly, steadily, until the day came when they would regret underestimating me. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes and a heavy heart. My reflection in the mirror almost startled me. Dark circles, pale cheeks, lips pressed thin like I'd aged 10 years overnight. Still, I tied my hair back neatly, put on the plain dress laid out by the servants, and prepared for another day of silent endurance. But fate had other plans. The first sign of a crack came at breakfast. Han Shichen, as always, sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his tailored suit flawless even at dawn. He was scrolling through his tablet, his jaw sharp and unyielding. I sat several chairs away, as invisible to him as the steam rising from my untouched porridge. One of the maids leaned close to him, too close. Her voice dripped honey. "Sir, would you like me to prepare your tea just the way you like it? Strong and with honey to soothe your throat." Her tone was more flirt than service. I lowered my eyes, my spoon trembling slightly. Before I could process it, his voice cut across the table, sharp and cold. "Step back." The maid froze, color draining from her face. She bowed quickly and scurried off, shame painting her cheeks. My eyes flickered up in surprise. Han Shichen didn't look at me, but for the first time I wondered, had he noticed the whispers among the staff? Had he noticed how they treated me? I wanted to ask, but his face was unreadable, his attention already back on his screen. The moment passed, but it planted a tiny, fragile seed of doubt in my heart. Maybe he wasn't completely blind. The second crack appeared that same afternoon. I had been told to accompany him to a business conference. My palms were sweaty, nerves coiled tight in my chest after the last disaster at the luncheon. I wanted to refuse, but saying no wasn't an option in this house. So I followed him, silent and stiff, into the grand hall filled with men in sharp suits and women who glittered like jewels. The moment I entered, the whispers started again. "There she is, the maid wife. She'll embarrass him again. She doesn't even know which fork to use. My cheeks burned, but I straightened my shoulders, repeating silently, endure, endure, endure. Halfway through the luncheon, I accidentally spilled a few drops of water on the pristine tablecloth. Gasps rose around me like a tidal wave. A woman burst into mocking laughter. Careless as expected. Some people just don't belong here. The sting of humiliation hit hard. I reached for my napkin, clumsy and desperate to clean it, but before I could, a hand stopped me. His hand. Han Shichen calmly set his own napkin down, covering the faint wet mark with deliberate grace. His voice was even, commanding the room with practiced ease. Is this what amuses you all? A drop of water. He glanced at the woman who had mocked me, his gaze colder than steel. If so, perhaps you should reconsider how little your own lives must offer. The hall fell into silence. The mocking woman's face flushed deep red as she shrank back into her chair. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. He didn't look at me, not once, but in that single act, dismissing their ridicule, silencing their cruelty, he had shielded me. It wasn't affection. It wasn't love. But it was something I had never expected from him. The whispers shifted. They no longer laughed openly. They stared at me differently, calculating, cautious. That night, back at the mansion, I finally gathered the courage to speak. Why did you defend me today? My voice was small, trembling, but desperate for an answer. Han Shichen stood by the window, city lights painting his figure in gold and shadow. He didn't turn, but his voice was steady. Because your humiliation is mine. You carry my name now. I won't allow anyone to mock what belongs to me. The words should have cut. What belongs to me? Possession, not a person. Yet something inside me shifted. Because for the first time he acknowledged it, not just in private but before everyone, that I was tied to him. That I mattered, even if only as his wife in name. I stared at his back, my emotions a storm I couldn't untangle. Anger, gratitude, confusion, a flicker of warmth I tried to smother before it could grow. But that night, as I lay in bed, I replayed his words over and over. His defense at the luncheon. The way his hand had stopped mine, shielding me from further shame. The cracks in his coldness were faint, almost invisible. But they were there. And if there were cracks, maybe, just maybe, there was more beneath his icy exterior than I had ever imagined. I closed my eyes, torn between fear and a dangerous hope. My name is Mei Lin, 22, once a maid. Now the wife of a man whose name alone can silence an entire city. Li Jun. The cold CEO who rules over everything with an iron heart. For weeks, I had lived like a shadow in his mansion. We rarely spoke, and when we did, it was only in clipped, detached words. Yet something was changing. Something I couldn't name but could feel burning in the silence between us. The first time I noticed it was one quiet morning. I was arranging fresh flowers in the hall when I felt his gaze on me. Not the usual glance of indifference, but a lingering one, heavy enough to make my fingers tremble. When I looked up, he quickly looked away, expression blank, as though nothing had happened. But I had seen it. The cracks were forming in his coldness. That night, during dinner, he sat across from me in silence as usual. The clinking of silverware echoed in the vast dining hall. Then unexpectedly he asked, "Did you eat enough at lunch today?" I almost dropped my spoon. It was such a simple question, yet from him it felt like thunder in a clear sky. My heart fluttered wildly and I managed to nod. Yes. His eyes softened for half a second before the mask slipped back on. He cleared his throat and shifted his gaze away, as though regretting even asking. Days passed and I noticed more subtle things. He began leaving his office door open when I passed by, as if waiting for me to speak. When the weather turned chilly, I found an extra blanket folded neatly at the edge of my bed, though he would never admit it was him. But what shook me most was the night of the storm. The thunder rattled the windows, lightning flashing like knives across the sky. I sat alone in my room hugging my knees when suddenly the door opened. It was Li Jun. Without a word, he walked in, his usually pristine hair slightly damp, his suit jacket draped casually over his arm. He looked almost human. Are you afraid of storms? His voice was low, unusually gentle. I swallowed hard. And no. I mean, maybe a little. He glanced at the trembling candlelight, then at me. For the first time I saw something in his eyes that wasn't ice or disdain. It was warmth, concern, maybe even desire. He didn't touch me. He didn't sit beside me. Instead, he stood there, as though fighting an invisible war within himself. Finally he muttered, "Sleep. You're safe here." And then he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Safe. No one had ever told me I was safe before. The villagers' gossip still burned my ears whenever I went out. That maid climbed into a golden bed. They sneered. She'll be discarded soon, once he tires of her. Their cruel words dug into my chest, but something inside me was shifting. When Li Jun's gaze lingered, when his voice lowered just for me, when his cold exterior cracked, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to this marriage than humiliation. But that thought terrified me. Because what if I was wrong? What if I let myself believe, only to fall harder when he finally cast me aside? One evening as I prepared tea, he entered the kitchen. My heart raced. He never came here. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, his powerful frame leaning casually against the counter. "You made this?" he asked, eyeing the teapot. I nodded nervously. "Yes. I thought you might like some." He took the cup from my hands, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. Heat shot through me and I nearly dropped the tray. He sipped. His expression softened just barely. "Not bad," he murmured. The corner of his mouth curved, so faint, so fleeting, but I caught it. A smile. And in that moment the man everyone called ruthless, untouchable, cold-blooded, looked at me like I was the only warmth he wanted. But with every step closer, tension coiled tighter around us. At night I lay awake, my heart pounding whenever I heard his footsteps outside my door. Would he enter? Would he speak? I longed for something I didn't dare admit. And when our eyes met across the room, the air thickened, heavy with something unspoken. His glances lingered too long, his voice dipped too low, and the space between us shrank, even when we stood far apart. We were caught in a dangerous dance. One wrong move and I would lose myself completely. Yet one right move, and maybe I would find a love I never believed I deserved. The walls of his coldness were cracking. And through those cracks I saw glimpses of a man not carved from stone, but one who burned just as fiercely as I did. The question was, when the fire finally consumed us both, would it destroy me or set me free? The ballroom was suffocating. Glittering chandeliers hung above, laughter echoed, champagne glasses clinked. It was one of those elite gatherings where women wore gowns worth more than a year of my wages and men carried themselves like kings. I had been forced to attend as Mrs. Zhao, a title the others sneered at behind their jeweled fans. But what crushed me wasn't their whispers, it was the moment I saw him. Zhao Tianzi, my cold husband, standing at the center of the room with another woman's hand looped through his arm. She was flawless. Tall, elegant, her lips painted blood red, her eyes gleaming with pride. Mo Iran, his childhood sweetheart, the one the media still whispered about as the woman meant for him. And Zhao Tianzi didn't pull away. He let her cling to him as if she belonged there. My chest tightened. I told myself not to care. After all, he had never hidden his disdain for me. I was just a replacement bride, a contract, a nuisance in his perfect life. But seeing them together was a dagger I couldn't ignore. The crowd noticed me standing there, pale, frozen, clutching the hem of my borrowed dress. The whispers turned sharper. Isn't that the maid he married out of spite? She actually thought she could be Mrs. Zhao? Pathetic. Look at him ignoring her completely. Heat burned in my cheeks. I wanted to disappear. But then Mo Iran's voice carried across the hall, sharp enough to pierce through the music. "Ah, Ling Wei," she purred sweetly, though venom dripped from every syllable. "You've come too? How admirable the way you pretend to fit in here." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to bow my head politely. Before I could reply, Zhao Tian's voice cut through, cold and merciless. Iran, don't waste your time. She doesn't belong in this world. The word struck me harder than any slap. Not belong. In front of hundreds of people, my husband had declared me unworthy, nothing but an intruder in his perfect circle. Gasps erupted around me, followed by mocking chuckles. I felt stripped bare, humiliated beyond repair. My lips trembled, but no words came. Only the crushing weight of shame. I turned to leave, desperate to escape those cruel eyes and sharper tongues. But as I took a step, Iran's hand shot out. She deliberately spilled her glass of red wine across my dress. "Oh dear," she smirked, her false innocence gleaming. "How clumsy of me." The crimson stain spread across my gown like spilled blood, and everyone laughed. Something inside me snapped. I looked at Zhao Tianzi. Not once did he defend me. Not once did he stop her. His eyes were cold, distant, as if I were nothing more than a speck of dust in his empire. Tears blurred my vision, but I lifted my chin. For the first time I didn't run. My voice cracked, but it carried. "Zhou Zhao," I said, the title tasting like poison. "Since I am such a disgrace in your eyes, why keep me by your side? Why not release me from this humiliation?" The hall went silent. For a flicker of a second I saw something flash across his face, anger? Surprise. But it vanished, replaced with icy indifference. "You think you can walk away from me so easily?" he said, his voice like a blade. "Don't forget, Ling Wei, your entire life belongs to me. You can't leave unless I allow it." A cruel silence followed, broken only by the pounding of my heart. I couldn't breathe. The humiliation, the coldness, the prison of this marriage. It all crashed down on me at once. And right there, in front of the glittering crowd, I tore off the wedding ring from my finger and hurled it at his feet. Gasps echoed again. "If you see me as nothing," I whispered hoarsely, "then I'll be nothing to you from this moment forward." The ring clattered on the marble floor, rolling until it stopped by his polished shoes. Zhao Tian's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening with a storm I couldn't read. But I didn't stay to find out. I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last, my vision swimming with tears. Behind me, I heard murmurs, Iran's triumphant laugh, and Zhao Tian's voice low and dangerous, but I didn't look back. That night marked the breaking point. For the first time I defied him publicly. For the first time I dared to sever the chain that bound me. But little did I know, Zhao Tianzi wasn't about to let me go. And the war between us had only just begun. The rain fell hard against the city that night as I stumbled into the streets. The red wine stain on my dress had dried into a grotesque reminder of my humiliation. My hair clung to my cheeks, my shoes cut into my feet, but none of it compared to the storm inside me. I had thought anger would carry me, but underneath it all was something worse, pain, betrayal. A hollow ache that gnawed at my chest until I could hardly breathe. I returned to the tiny apartment I once lived in before marrying him. The one place in the world that still felt like mine. The creaking wooden floor, the leaky faucet, the patched-up curtains. At least here I wasn't Mrs. Zhao. I was just Ling Wei. I thought he'd let me disappear. That my defiance meant freedom. But the next night proved me wrong. The knock on my door was sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. When I opened it, I froze. Zhao Tianzi stood there, his suit immaculate, his eyes shadowed, his jaw tight. But he wasn't surrounded by bodyguards or assistants. He was alone. My heart lurched painfully. I tried to shut the door, but his hand shot out, pushing it open. Running away? His voice was low, rougher than usual. I glared at him, every nerve on fire. "Haven't you humiliated me enough? What more do you want?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His presence filled the tiny room. Too big, too powerful, too suffocating. But something about him tonight was different. The arrogance was still there, but beneath it, there was an edge, raw, unsettled. "You think you can just walk out?" he said, his voice quieter now. "You think you can defy me like that in front of everyone and disappear?" "Yes," I snapped, my hands trembling. "Because I'm tired, Zhao Tianzi. Tired of being your pawn, your joke, your..." My voice cracked and I swallowed hard. I don't want to live in chains anymore. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked on mine. Then, something I never expected happened. His hand lifted, not in anger, not in control. He reached toward me almost hesitantly, his fingers brushing the edge of my damp hair. I flinched, but he didn't pull away. His touch lingered, almost fragile. "Do you think I don't notice?" he said softly, his voice stripped of its usual steel. "Do you think I didn't see you standing there, enduring their laughter, holding your head high even when they tore you apart?" My breath hitched. I blinked, stunned. This wasn't the cold CEO who dismissed me as nothing. This was someone else. "You shouldn't have married me," I whispered, the truth bleeding out. "You hate me." "I don't hate you." His words came so quickly, so fiercely, I almost didn't believe them. His jaw tightened, as if forcing himself to admit something he had buried. "I hate myself." I froze. The confession, raw and startling, hung heavy in the air. He turned away, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, suddenly restless, human. "That night," he said quietly, "when I saw you walking away, throwing the ring back at me, I should have stopped you. But I didn't. Because if I did, if I admitted that I cared, I'd lose control. And I can't afford to lose control." For the first time I saw it, a crack in his armor. Not the ruthless CEO. Not the man who ruled boardrooms and crushed rivals. Just a man. Tired. Alone. Chained by something I didn't yet understand. But part of me recoiled. "Control." I whispered bitterly. "So everything is about control to you? My dignity, my life, my heart. You think those are just pieces on your chessboard?" His eyes snapped back to mine, a storm raging inside them. He took a step closer, closing the space between us until I could feel the heat of his breath. "Don't mistake me, Ling Wei," he murmured, his voice rough. "You can defy me, you can hate me. You can throw my ring in my face, but you can never leave me." My heart pounded wildly, torn between fury and something more dangerous. Something I couldn't name. I shoved him back, my hands trembling. "Why?" I demanded. "Why me? Out of all the women in the world, why chain yourself to someone you despise?" His gaze bore into me, and then his answer came, low and jagged. "Because the night we met, you were the first person who ever looked at me like I wasn't a monster." My breath caught. The weight of his words slammed into me, breaking through my defenses. I remembered that night faintly, the storm, the drunken party, the moment our worlds collided. He had been cold, furious, lashing out at everyone, and I had been foolish enough to stand my ground, to speak to him like he was human, not untouchable. And now, standing here, his eyes burning with vulnerability, I realized something terrifying. Zhao Tianze wasn't just keeping me in his life out of pride or control. He needed me. Not the way a man needs a possession, but the way a drowning man clings to air. The realization shook me to my core. But fear and anger still held me tight. I stepped back, tears stinging my eyes. "If that's true," I whispered, "then prove it. Stop hurting me. Stop letting them humiliate me. Stop hiding behind your walls." He stared at me, silent, torn. And for once he didn't have an answer. The storm between us raged silently in that tiny apartment. Two broken people bound together by chains neither of us fully understood. And as he finally left, the echo of his confession lingered in the air. For the first time I realized, the ruthless CEO wasn't invincible. He was vulnerable. And dangerously, that vulnerability pointed straight to me. I never believed the world could be so cruel, until I saw how quickly outsiders circled, ready to strike the moment a tiny crack appeared between us. Rumors spread like wildfire. It began with whispers in the boardroom and in the gilded halls of his empire. The maid-turned-wife is nothing more than a stain on his name. They said my presence was weakening him. That his once cold, untouchable dominance had started to soften. I could see it in their eyes, the vultures circling, waiting to tear me apart. First I thought I could endure it. I had already survived humiliation, coldness, and rejection inside his home. What were a few whispers compared to that? But this was different. This was organized. Deliberate. A trap being woven around us. One evening, as I brought a tray of tea into his study, I noticed papers scattered across his desk. Confidential reports. Photographs. My photographs. I froze. They were images of me entering the marketplace, of me speaking to strangers, of me walking alone. My heart nearly stopped. Someone had been following me. Who gave these to you? I whispered, my voice shaking. He didn't look up at me. His jaw was clenched tight, eyes burning with restrained fury. You should tell me. Before I hear it from someone else. Who are you meeting behind my back? The world crashed around me in that moment. He didn't believe me. After everything, he thought I was betraying him. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to stand tall. Those men in the pictures? They are villagers, workers, people who helped me when I had nothing. I owe them kindness, nothing more. But his silence cut deeper than any shouted accusation. He didn't yell. He didn't strike. He simply looked at me like a stranger. That cold, unyielding gaze pierced straight into my chest. I felt the distance between us widening again, undoing all the fragile threads of warmth we had begun to weave. The next day the trap grew tighter. An article exploded across the tabloids. Cinderella's secret lovers. CEO's wife exposed. My face was splashed across the front page, painted as a gold digger, a liar, a woman who clawed her way into his bed by deceit. The public mocked me. The whispers of the elite grew bolder, no longer hidden behind silk fans or champagne glasses. I was branded as shameless, unworthy, and worse, a danger to his empire. I wanted to scream the truth, but who would believe a poor maid against the carefully planted lies of powerful enemies? For the first time I saw exhaustion in his face. He didn't defend me publicly. He didn't shield me as I hoped he would. Instead, he became colder, more distant, as if retreating behind the fortress of arrogance that had always defined him. And yet, in the quiet of the night, when he thought I was asleep, I saw him gripping the edge of the bed, shoulders trembling, eyes bloodshot from reading reports until dawn. He wasn't unaffected. The trap wasn't meant only for me, it was meant to break him too. Still, the humiliation cut me open. At a gala meant to showcase his company's triumphs, a rival CEO's wife sneered in my face. So this is the maid who thinks she can wear diamonds? Be careful, darling. When glass shatters, it cuts deep. The crowd laughed. I stood frozen, my hands trembling, the weight of their ridicule pressing me down. And then in that moment of despair I realized something chilling. This wasn't random gossip. Someone powerful had orchestrated it all. Someone who wanted me destroyed so he would lose control. The trap had been laid and I had walked right into it. That night as I stood alone on the balcony, the rain soaking through my gown, I whispered to myself, if they think I'm weak, they are wrong. I will not break. Not again. But as I turned I found him standing there watching me through the storm. His eyes unreadable. His voice low, almost trembling. Tell me once more, why should I trust you? The pain in his words was sharper than any dagger. He wasn't only doubting me. He was doubting himself. Doubting the very thread of connection we had begun to build. The trap had done its work. We were no longer just fighting outsiders, we were fighting the cracks inside our own hearts. And I didn't know if love could survive it. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the betrayal, the whispers, the laughter, and above all, the look in his eyes when he doubted me. It cut deeper than knives. If even he didn't trust me, then what was the point of enduring all this humiliation? The mansion was quiet, but inside my chest storms roared. I sat at the vanity, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale. The girl staring back at me looked broken. Yet beneath that fragility, I saw something else, flickering fire. I whispered to my reflection, enough. No more being silent. Morning light bled into the room as the household stirred. I walked into the dining hall with trembling hands, clutching the folder I had hidden for weeks. Documents, records, evidence. Proof that everything pinned on me had been orchestrated. My hands sweated, but my voice was steady. I have something to say, I announced. Every head turned. The board members were there. His relatives too, vultures who had always waited for me to fall. And at the end of the long table, he sat, cold, unreadable, his fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood. Another excuse? His aunt sneered. We're tired of hearing the maid's sob stories. I ignored her. I opened the folder and laid out the papers. These, I said, forcing my voice not to crack, are financial records showing how the money disappeared. Not through me, but through a shell company tied to your own nephew. Gasps erupted. Eyes darted. His cousin, the same one who always mocked me, paled instantly. Pressed on. These are text messages, screenshots proving the setup. And here, I pulled out the USB drive, my final weapon, is footage from the surveillance cameras. I begged the security chief to give it to me, and he risked his job for the truth. The room exploded into murmurs. Chairs scraped. His cousin shouted, lies. All fabricated. But then I played the video. The projector hummed to life, and on the white wall, their betrayal unfolded for everyone to see. The cousin transferring money, planting false evidence, whispering with others about ruining the maid who dared marry into power. The silence that followed was deafening. Every lie, every sneer, every accusation. They all collapsed beneath the weight of undeniable truth. I turned to him. His face was rigid. His jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. His eyes flicked from the screen to me, back and forth, as though his mind struggled to catch up with what his heart had already known. I never betrayed you, I said, my voice trembling now, not from fear but from release. I never wanted your money, your status, or your empire. All I wanted was to be seen as more than a maid, and more than a pawn in your family's games. Tears pricked my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. You doubted me when I needed you most. That is what hurt the most. He stood abruptly. The chair screeched against the floor. Everyone froze, waiting for his verdict. His cousin whimpered. Cousin, it's not what it looks like. Enough, he snapped, his voice like thunder. Security, take him away. The guards moved instantly, seizing the cousin as he fought and cursed. Papers scattered, voices rose, chaos reigned. But in the middle of it all, his gaze locked on mine. There was no longer ice in his eyes. There was something else, guilt, regret, and a storm of emotions he could barely contain. When the room cleared, and only the two of us remained, silence stretched like an unbridgeable chasm. He stepped closer, his voice rough. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp. Would you have believed me? Or would you have accused me of another lie? His face twisted as if my words struck him physically. He reached out, then hesitated, his hand hovering inches from mine before falling back to his side. I was wrong. His voice cracked, just faintly but enough to shake me. I doubted the one person who stood by me when no one else did. And now, he trailed off, his shoulders heavy with unspoken shame. I swallowed hard, torn between anger and the ache of the love I still couldn't erase. Truth doesn't erase the wounds, I whispered. It doesn't undo the nights I cried alone, the moments I felt like dirt beneath your family's feet. He looked as if he'd shatter right there. Then let me make it right, he said quietly. Give me a chance to make it right. For the first time, the cold CO, the man everyone feared, stood before me not as an untouchable figure, but as a man stripped bare by truth. Vulnerable, desperate, human. And in that moment I realized the exposure of truth had broken not only the lies around us, but also the walls inside him. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. My heart, though trembling, held its ground. We'll see, I whispered, turning away, though my tears betrayed me, sliding silently down my cheeks. Behind me, I heard him exhale shakily, as though holding himself together with sheer will. The empire remained his, the truth was mine. But the battlefield of our hearts, messy, raw, unresolved, had only just begun. I never thought silence could be so deafening. For days after the truth came out, the mansion was filled with whispers, hurried footsteps, and shifting alliances. His cousin was dragged away, the board fractured, and the vultures who once mocked me suddenly bowed their heads in shame when I passed. But none of it mattered. The only battle left was the one between him and me. I spent nights in my room, the evidence folder still on my desk like a relic of war. I had won the truth, but at what cost? Trust, once shattered, doesn't heal overnight. My heart ached every time I remembered his accusing eyes. How easily he had believed the worst of me. How his silence had cut deeper than any insult. On the third night, a knock echoed at my door. Heavy. Hesitant. For a moment I considered ignoring it. But something inside me whispered, "Face him." I opened the door. He stood there. Not in his usual tailored suit of armor, but in a plain shirt, sleeves rolled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For the first time, he didn't look like the untouchable CEO. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, who had been carrying an invisible weight. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, glancing at the folder on my desk, then at me. The silence stretched until I thought it might suffocate us both. Finally he spoke. "I destroyed the one person I swore to protect. I saw betrayal where there was only loyalty. I let my family's poison blind me. And now," his voice cracked slightly, "I fear I've lost you forever." My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to unleash all the nights of tears, the humiliation, the loneliness. But another part, the foolish heart that had fallen for him, still longed for his warmth. I crossed my arms, steadying myself. "Do you know what it felt like?" My voice trembled with suppressed rage. "To stand in a room full of your family while they laughed at me? To be called a thief, a liar, trash? And then to look at you, the one person who could have silenced them all with a word, only to see you doubting me." He flinched as if I'd struck him. His eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "Every word you speak is a knife I deserve. I have no excuse. Only regret." Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back. "You broke me. And I will spend every day proving I can rebuild what I shattered," he whispered. He stepped closer, cautiously, as though afraid I might push him away. Not as the CEO, not as the man with power. Just as me. A man who loves you, who can't breathe knowing he's lost your trust. My breath caught. Love. He had never said the word before. Not once in all our cold marriage, in all our unspoken longing. "You love me." The words escaped me in a whisper, fragile, unbelieving. "Yes." His voice was raw, stripped of pride. "I've loved you from the moment I saw your defiance. Even as a maid who refused to bow to anyone's cruelty. I just didn't know how to face it. I was too cold, too proud, too afraid of being vulnerable. And in that pride, I hurt you." The walls I had built inside me trembled. For so long I had yearned to hear those words. For so long I had convinced myself he was incapable of saying them. And now here he was, bare, vulnerable, offering me the very thing I thought he'd never give. But forgiveness wasn't so simple. "I don't know if I can just forget," I whispered, clutching my arms as though holding myself together. "Love doesn't erase scars." He reached for me, then stopped, letting his hand fall. "Then let me live with your scars. Let me earn back every piece of trust one broke. Not with promises, but with actions. If you walk away now, I'll let you go. I'll give you freedom, wealth, anything you ask. But if you stay," his voice faltered, "I will spend my life proving that you are not just my wife. You are my everything." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. The anger, the love, the pain, the longing, they collided inside me like a storm. And then before I could stop myself, tears spilled down my cheeks. "You idiot," I choked, half laughing, half sobbing. Why did it take nearly losing everything to finally say this? His own eyes shimmered as he stepped forward, closing the distance. This time when he reached for me, I didn't pull away. His arms wrapped around me, strong yet trembling, as though he feared I might vanish. For the first time, I didn't feel like a maid pretending to belong in his world. I felt like his equal, his partner, his wife. We stood there, clinging to each other, letting the silence say what words could not. The reckoning had broken us, but in its ashes, something new was born. Raw, fragile, but real. When I finally pulled back, I looked up into his tear-streaked face and whispered, "Don't you dare doubt me again." Never, he vowed, pressing his forehead against mine. From this day forward, I will fight beside you, not against you. And in that moment, I knew our love wasn't a fairy tale. It was scarred, messy, tested by fire. But it was ours. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe in us. In him. In a future where I was not just the poor maid forced into marriage, but the woman who had claimed her place in his heart. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most powerful love story of all. If you believe love tested by fire is stronger than any lie, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that will keep your heart racing.